What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Tuesday afternoon, and we have some big injury updates for you guys. Florida State now just about a week and a half away from kickoff to the 2025 season against the Alabama Crimson Tide, and there are some players, some potential starters too, that we're monitoring heavily as we go into game week next week. But with me to cover all of this is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameday.com. D-Lou, we're getting closer and closer to kickoff. And with that, now we're starting to get some injury updates, which are crucial for this game next Saturday.
Yeah, like you said, the beginning of the 2025 season is right around the corner for Florida State. And obviously, it's been a pretty physical preseason in Tallahassee these last couple of weeks. And yeah, now some injuries popping up just before Florida State takes on the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the Seminoles hoping to have the majority of these guys available going into that first game. And obviously, that's going to be crucial coming off of that 2024 season.
Yeah, and you know what? We all asked for probably some more physical practices, and we've heard Florida State's always had brutal luck. It feels like after scrimmages, it feels like there's always someone that goes down. It even started really at the beginning of fall camp with Brock Glenn, who we're going to give an update on here in just a few moments. Also, to Squirrel White, even to a true freshman who we are expecting to be in that rotation for the Alabama game. A lot of updates here from Mike Norvell, along with some of the assistant coaches as well. But this is just what comes with football. There's things that happen in practices, and it's just the way it goes. But before we get started, if you're here with us here on YouTube, hit the like button down below. If you're on YouTube as well, subscribe. We're seeing a good amount of new subscribers there, and deeply do appreciate now 16,000 subscribers. So appreciate it a ton. We have a ton of content as well coming your way all throughout the, not much more of the preseason, but definitely once we get into the season next week. But let's go ahead and get started with number one, and it's here on the thumbnail. Squirrel White, someone who has dealt with injuries throughout his college career, the former Tennessee transfer wide receiver who really we were hearing great things of. I would say maybe a little bit more than Deuce Robinson, of a guy that has been flashing all throughout fall camp. He came into fall camp fully ready to go. We were hearing, him connecting nicely with Thomas Castellanos, a lot of explosive plays too, as well in those scrimmages from Mike Norvell. But as of late on Saturday over the weekend, Mike Norvell gave an injury update here on him. Squirrel had to get something that came up. We're feeling very confident that he will be available, but he'll probably be limited here this next week, which is right now as we speak. So just not too much further away from kickoff, D-Lou. Certainly concerning in my opinion, because he's dealt with these injuries before, and it seems like it's something that they're going to continue to monitor, certainly once they get into game week next week, and it could be a game time decision for one of your star players that you brought through in the transfer portal.
Yeah, unfortunately, Squirrel, he's been bitten by the injury bug as of late, coming off a 2024 season at Tennessee where he was banged up for a decent amount of that season, and then obviously transferred over to Florida State. And it was the same thing back during spring practice where he missed some time due to injuries along with multiple guys in that wide receiver room. And across the entire offense. So it was good to hear that he was fully healthy coming into fall camp. And we even heard Tommy Castellanos talking about the work that the two were able to put in over the summer, and it sounded like he hit the ground running, especially early on in the preseason. You mentioned him standing out among the wide receivers, and Squirrel White was a guy that Mike Norvell brought up by name during that second scrimmage about a big touchdown pass that he caught from Tommy. So, he was ascending in the right direction, but I believe he suffered a setback during that scrimmage, and, he was spotted during that ACC Network special on Florida State last week, spotted on a scooter during some of those clips that were shown of Florida State's practices. So, you're certainly hoping that this guy can rebound quickly and be good to go for the Alabama matchup, especially, if this is a lower body injury, and Squirrel White being a guy who relies so much on that speed. But, Florida State, they need this guy. They need Deuce, obviously, in that wide receiver room. There's not a ton of experience there outside of those two guys. And we'll get into Gavin Blackwell as well, the third most experienced wide receiver in this room. And he's someone now getting back to practice, but he missed the majority of the beginning of the preseason with an injury. So, just not good vibes for Florida State's offense ahead of this first game, where you're hoping to build some real chemistry and have all your playmakers ready to go against Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that concerned us a lot was during the spring, you didn't have a full Squirrel White as well. Deuce Robinson was banged up too. And then you go into fall camp, and there's not been a lot of time for this offense to build a whole ton of chemistry. A lot of it has been relied on those big scrimmages that they've been holding in the evenings, and then just seeing how things go there. And like you were saying, Squirrel White has been making plays, but it is mammoth that he comes and is available against Alabama because, like you said, there's not a whole ton of experience in this starting unit, D-Lou, and I think you're expecting to see a true freshman with Javon Boggs as a starter in this lineup.
Yep.
That's just where Florida State's at because, too, you're dealing with another injury with Wayne McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's the thing with Squirrel White, man. That's kind of been the big question mark when you were landing him is how healthy is he going to be? How long lasting is it? And it seems like it's just a roller coaster ride with him. And that's what certainly stinks about it because Florida State, and we're going to see Thomas Castellanos here this next Saturday. It's going to be really intriguing to see how Gus Malzahn runs him, specifically running him. He's going to be moving him around a lot, but having those explosive plays opens up a lot of things. When Squirrel White's doing well, that means that also too maybe Deuce Robinson finds opportunities there in some type of the afternoon in Doak Campbell Stadium. And it helps each other out a lot. But whenever you're just going to be stuck maybe with just a true freshman and Deuce Robinson, we'll see if Squirrel White is a full go. It gets a little concerning there for what you want to do on offense, and you got to hope that he can come back and be available for you next Saturday afternoon.
And I mean, Squirrel, he's the most experienced skill player on this offense, and he's a proven product. When you have a guy out there, a veteran who has 3 years of experience in the SEC and everything he was able to do over at Tennessee, you know what you're going to get out of Squirrel White when he is on the field. But that's now become the biggest thing is his availability. And, sometimes these lower body injuries, they can linger into the season. Like we mentioned, I mean, Squirrel White's game is precedented on his speed, his explosiveness, his athleticism, ability to get open and make plays down the field. And not just that, but his potential ability as a contributor, a punt returner on special teams, an area where we've heard he's made an impact for Florida State this fall. So, I mean, you need him, you need Deuce, because outside of that, you just don't have a lot of experience in that wide receiver room. And it starts to get a little bit dicey when you're like, all right, well, Javon Boggs is going to be out there in the starting lineup. And, Elijah Moore, Mekhi Danzy are guys that could potentially step in and contribute for Florida State going into year 2 of the program. But also, like you said, I mean, LaWayne McCoy has been banged up. And like we talked about, Gavin Blackwell has been banged up. So there are just so many question marks with this Florida State passing attack, and they don't have a lot of time to answer them.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the theme here later in the week when we do our season preview. And we were talking about it in our production meeting is the depth and how thin they are in some departments, both offense and also too on the defensive side as well. A lot on the defensive side. And when you lose a starter like this, a guy that they are backing on and banking on, it gets a little nerve-wracking, I'll be honest with you. But that's something we're going to keep a close eye on, see where Squirrel White's at. Maybe hopefully we'll get an update here near the end of the week from Mike on what they expect him to look like going into week 1 against Alabama. Now, there is another concerning update, and this one's going to be on the defensive side of the ball, and this is coming from a true freshman defensive tackle, Kevin Wynn, someone that we've talked about immensely on this show the last couple of weeks, certainly in this fall camp after taking that next step, trimming down some of that weight. We've heard from Terrence Knighton. They feel very high on him. Tony White has also brought him up as well. Mike Norvell certainly has too, and has been someone that has been kind of around that same stride as the other true freshman twins with the Desir twins, those two guys impressing. And Kevin Wynn was a part of that. Now, there's some big question marks if he's even going to be available for this Alabama game here. This was the news on Saturday from Mike Norvell saying Kevin Wynn will be the one that will see exactly where things go with that, but that could be one that could stretch a little bit. Have something happen here this last week, but we'll see how it goes. Just the usual. I'm trying to decipher Mike Norvell's coach speak. It's like there's coach speak and then there's Mike Norvell coach speak, which is almost on steroids, which is so irritating to deal with. But anyways, Kevin Wynn, as of right now, to me, I don't feel like he's going to be available for Alabama. Who knows? Something crazy could happen here, but I think that's very hurtful for your defensive line. as we were just talking about there, you're thin in a lot of different departments, and defensive line is probably number one, if not number two. You are right there at the tippity top of, you don't have a lot of guys there, and to be thin to begin the season certainly hurts you, certainly with the kind of talent that Kevin Wynn has shown so far.
Hmm. And I mean, he's been one of the guys that defensive coordinator Tony White, I mean, has consistently mentioned by name amongst that defensive line group. And, it hasn't been a very long list. You mentioned two of the guys, the Desir twins, Kevin Wynn, Jaden Jones. Those have been the primary names that I feel like we've heard from Tony White in that defensive line room throughout those first two scrimmages. So, I mean, it sounds like he was on the fast track. And yeah, I mean, you can't really take a lot away from that jumble of words that Mike Norvell put out there to update Kevin Wynn's status. But just based on that, it doesn't sound like he's going to be available against Alabama, which is certainly a blow. I mean, he was starting to rise up in that interior defensive line room. And, obviously Florida State looking for big things, not only from Darrell Jackson, but those guys behind him and KJ Sampson and Daniel Lyons, who we haven't heard a ton about this preseason. Mike Norvell mentioned last week Daniel Lyons still working his way back into football shape after missing the majority of spring practice with an injury, which, I mean, isn't something that you really want to hear 2 weeks before kickoff.
Yeah.
So Kevin Wynn, I mean, even with this injury, and if he's forced to miss a game or a little bit of time to begin his first season at Florida State, once he does return, I mean, I certainly think this is going to be a guy who's primed to rise up in that two deep throughout the 2025 season, much like a guy who, not dealing with an injury, thankfully, but Usman Kroma, who has jumped right in, and, we'll see. He's given himself a chance to be that starter at running back on August 30th. So got about 6 more days until we get our first depth chart.
Yeah, we know we are getting close. And then too, we won't get one in week 1 for the Alabama game because if you guys didn't know, there will be injury updates in the ACC games. So we won't get that until Florida State faces off against Virginia, and that's when Florida State will have to put out and their injury updates, which will be close to kind of what the NFL is doing, which is going to be very interesting to see how that works on the college side of things. But still, for week 1, though, we won't get a full injury kind of lineup there for this game. But, for me, I think it's very concerning because I haven't heard anything about Darrell Jackson. I haven't heard anything about KJ Sampson. I haven't heard anything about Daniel Lyons. And I don't know. And maybe it is on FSU side to hide things. Do you think they're hiding things, D-Lou? You think Darrell Jackson's just been ripping through Pettibon at the center position and just eating up these guards and tearing them alive? You think that maybe that's what's happening? Maybe,
but
I mean,
at the same time, I feel like we'd hear about it. I mean, we're hearing about the Jaden Jones resurgence. We've heard some things about James Williams and his progression as an every down defensive end rather than just a pass rushing specialist. We haven't heard that same amount of praise towards a guy like Darrell Jackson, who you're hoping can be arguably the top player on your defense this season, or, even those key reserves like KJ Sampson and Daniel Lyons. And, you go back to the spring, and KJ Sampson was someone that the coaching staff challenged to be more physical during practice. And, you're wondering if he has taken heed to that. But like we said, haven't heard a ton from him. Yeah, I've heard the coaching staff and talking about Darrell and wanting him to be more consistent, which, I mean, I feel like has kind of been the theme since he arrived at Florida State nearly 2 years ago. So, I mean, like you kind of talked about, there are some big questions across this entire defense, and especially on that defensive front where you're hoping these guys can rise to the occasion, but what if they don't?
Yeah. And, too, which was interesting to me, D-Lou, is, they changed up the scrimmage lineup for like their schedule on how they like to do things. Usually you are having a scrimmage this last weekend, and then you go into your game prep, but they held their last scrimmage 2 weeks ago. And so I'm wondering if that has any kind of play into hopefully getting guys healthier, because they have had concerns in the past of doing this. Of course, you have 2 new coordinators coming in, so they're going to have a big playing part in how they want to run things as well. I know they just did kind of more of a walkthrough type scrimmage just a few days ago. So that's something that, hopefully some of those guys that were dinged up, allow them to heal up a good bit. They've got 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks until kickoff in Tallahassee. So, it's just, this is what happens in football. But, there were guys that still you wanted to have ramp up, but then some guys that were ramped up have been dinged up, like Squirrel White, and that it certainly hurts you quite a bit. Another guy, though, let's jump into the quarterback room, because I think this is one that we might be overlooking a little bit too much, because let's start off right here with Brock Glenn. He's someone that got hurt pretty early on in the early parts of fall camp. And he's one that we have not been able to see out there during the scrimmages. I mean, we're not out there anyways, but he's not out there at these scrimmages competing in a new offense with Gus Malzahn. And it's allowed for Kevin Sperry to come in and get a lot more reps. But Mike Norvell did say that he expects for Brock Glenn to be returning soon this week at some point. I did see him on the ACC network in the background there. He was dressed out last week, but I don't believe he was throwing. But he's out there. They're starting to probably ramp him up a little bit. But, man, when you have a quarterback like Thomas Castellanos, who is going to be utilized heavily in the run game and be running around and doing a lot of things, and he's going to be taking some hits now, it is worrisome a little bit, in my opinion, on if he gets hurt and you're almost going back to the 2024 season where you have multiple question marks in the quarterback room, because I'm not fully sold on Brock Glenn, and I'm not going to be sold on a true freshman coming in as well.
It's also just very unfortunate for Brock Glenn to miss the entirety of these reps during the preseason, and, potential time to build chemistry with the offense. Like we've talked about, the offensive line, the wide receivers, the running backs. I mean, they were all banged up during spring, and some of these practices these last couple of weeks, this has been the first time for this projected first team offense, and even some of those two deep guys to really be out there on the field working together, establishing chemistry. So, I mean, for Brock to miss out on that. And I mean, now the preseason effectively is over. As of Tuesday today, Florida State went into game prep and started fully preparing and transitioning over from preseason practices to focusing on that game against Alabama on August 30th. And, Brock, like you talked about, Logan, I mean, there's a possibility, knock on wood, that Tommy Castellanos, with his style of play, which includes running, taking hits, and being a smaller guy, it's possible to get banged up. I mean, that's just the sport of football. And in that event, you're probably thinking Brock Glenn, the guy with the second most experience on the roster, would be that backup quarterback, even if he has missed the entirety of the preseason. Now, I don't know if that's the case exactly. Kevin Sperry, I mean, we've heard good things about him from Mike Norvell, Tokars, Coach Malzahn, and obviously he took the majority of the snaps with the second team during both of those scrimmages. So he does have a leg up as far as practice time and working with that offense compared to Brock Glenn during the preseason. We'll have to see. I mean, we'll have to see when the depth chart comes out next week, but it's just not a good thing when your projected backup quarterback isn't out there consistently getting work. And, I know he's dealt with it. It appears to be more of an ankle injury. And even today going into practice, he was the lone quarterback who didn't have pads in his pants, thigh pads and knee pads. So we'll have to see how it goes here from Brock Glenn. But, I mean, a guy who has really been dealt a tough hand ever since he arrived at Florida State. Just seems like one thing of adversity after another for a guy like Brock Glenn.
How many more can he take at this point? He put on a lot of good size, too. He put on a lot of leg strength, you could tell, too, in the first day of fall camp. He looked impressive. It's just some things happen like that. It just stinks that it happens to a quarterback with a green jersey on. It's just, man, tough going there for Brock Glenn, but we'll continue to monitor that one. Let's go over to some more positive side of things here. Let's flip it over to some good stuff here. Jason Jenkins has been one of those. Florida State and Mike Norvell continue to praise him, saying that they've liked what he sees. He got some burn in that second scrimmage, which was a really good sign, and then two, getting really much of a full go as well into some of these practices, which I think is massively crucial, as we were just kind of, talking about the concern of the defensive line room and the pass rush and the depth there. And, you want to see where the guy that you were prioritizing a ton with Jason Jenkins coming in as being one of those pivotal pass rushers for you with James Williams from Nebraska. Like, man, getting him going is going to be huge. I think there's some really strong optimism that he's going to be available for you in that week one game.
And I continue to say it every time we talk about Jason Jenkins, but I mean, it's simply been incredible to see him return from what was a significant lower body, Achilles injury during the offseason. I mean, I don't think a couple months ago, I think people would have been very surprised if he would have played not only against Alabama, but maybe in the first month of the season at all. I mean, this was a serious injury, and you got to credit the guy for the work that he's put in to give himself a chance to play now the entirety of this 2025 season. And at the same time, Mike Norvell, Tony White, they're being pretty careful with his recovery and, not trying to over stress him as he gets back into work on the field. But it sounds like he's made an impact with what he has been able to do out there. Mike Norvell actually said about him on Tuesday, you feel his presence, a guy that plays with a great motor, very strong, powerful. We're still making sure that we're doing all things, building him up to maximize availability for game one. Excited about what I'm seeing from him. And, Jason Jenkins, a guy who could start for Florida State, maybe on the edge, maybe on the inside. He brings that versatility to the table, and certainly a positive update and something you want to see, especially, like we talked about, when you haven't heard about some of these other veterans in the defensive line room. And, that extends to guys that Florida State brought in from the transfer portal, like DeMonte Diggs. I feel like we haven't heard about him lately. Now, Deontay McCray was a guy that Mike Norvell discussed on Tuesday, but for some guys that do have some experience and veteran playing snaps in that defensive line room, we just haven't heard a ton about a lot of those guys. So Jenkins, he's got a chance to rise up and be a starter for Florida State on August 30th.
Mm-hmm. Which is good. That is some good stuff right there. If you're still with us hanging out, if you're on YouTube right now, please hit that like button. Appreciate it. Goes out to more FSU fans to get you in here. And also, too, if you have any questions or topics, I know we're at a random 3:30 at an afternoon, but still got about 50 of you guys here on YouTube itself. If you have any questions or some players you'd like us to jump into, we certainly will, but appreciate you guys hanging out with us on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. We're getting closer to kickoff, which I'm stoked for. I'm looking forward to being up there in Tallahassee. The new Doak renovations are looking good. I know my family went in there to go check it out over the weekend, and looks beautiful in there. Definitely the spear. You see that spear in there, Dustin?
Yeah. I saw that looked pretty dope. The picture on the wall of Osceola and Renegade, that was really cool. It seems like the design, I mean, they really went all out during these renovations. And I mean, I only got to see it, back in March when it was still a construction zone. I'd like another tour about right now.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're here on YouTube, like I said, we just hit 16,000 subscribers over the weekend. So deeply appreciative from us as always. And if you're new here or just been thinking about hitting the subscribe button, definitely give it a shot. We got a lot of stuff coming your way. Definitely once we get into the season with instant reaction videos right after the games on site for you guys, and a lot of quick hitters, breaking news, and some updates like these type of things that we're trying to do here more on YouTube for you guys. But let's keep moving here, D-Lou. We got a handful left. Jacob Rizzi is someone that was dinged up as well, talking about the offensive lineman that the staff feels very, very, very highly on, and might be someone that might be able to jump into this rotation at FSU, just depending on health and other things. But it seems like he's getting closer to 100%. He's going to be available. I think him and Jason Jenkins have been on that same ramp-up period, I would say, that same timeline I'd say the staff has been working with him on. And it seems like Rizzi is going to be a go against the Crimson Tide, which is solid news for Florida State when we're talking about thinness and departments on this team. Offensive line is that one. And when the staff feels highly on a player like this, you just got to keep your fingers crossed that he could stay healthy until you get into that week one game.
Yeah, this one's a little bit of a surprise for the Seminoles, because I think going into the preseason, for the most part, we thought Florida State had its projecting starting five up front. And, now Jacob Rizzi returning here in the latter half of the preseason from an injury that forced him to miss basically the entirety of the spring. It sounds like he's jumped right back into the mix, and I mean, giving himself to somehow enter that starting lineup despite missing so much previous time. And Mike Norvell actually said about him, he's put himself right in the mix within the competition this past week and a half. His experience, his ability, his confidence, you could feel it. I even mentioned to him yesterday, you feel the confidence in his body and how he's being hard on his feet, working to create movement. Still some things to clean up, just knocking off rust, but I like his progression. I like the attitude he brings. And, Rizzi, someone with veteran experience, transferred to Florida State last year, and we saw him start at three different positions, both guard spots, got some starts at center, previously has experience playing right tackle whenever he was at Harvard. So, I mean, he's a versatile guy that you can kind of move around in this lineup. And honestly, I think a perfect 6-man, like I said, with how he can contribute at different spots if someone was to go down. And this Florida State offensive line obviously has some serious injury question marks. Both your projected starting tackles missed time during the spring.
Yeah.
Richie Leonard missed the majority of that 2024 season last year after getting knocked out with an injury. And Adrian Medley has dealt with a season-ending injury during his college career. So to have a guy like Jacob Rizzi, even if he doesn't win the competition to start at one of those spots, just to be able to fill in and provide depth if a guy was to go down, and your left guard goes down, he can go on right guard, center, wherever. It's good to have a guy that you can plug and play, especially considering behind him you don't really have a ton of experience as far as your backup options.
Nope, you don't. No, you don't. And the good thing about it, at least for the plus here, is that Herb Hanna is going to be a offensive line coach that is going to want to keep the consistency of guys out there, not going to see a whole ton of rotating like you saw with Alex Atkins. So he wants to build that chemistry. But like you were saying earlier, there were some guys, definitely your tackles, that weren't in there in the spring, and that hurts you. And it hurts you as a whole offensive line, and then too as a quarterback as well, because you got to start getting your reads of understanding in some schemes and what you're running and some plays. Your left tackle might not be the strongest at this on this play right here, so you need to understand that you're not going to have a whole ton of time off your left side, or it's your right side, or it's your interior. So them not having a whole ton of spring for that offensive line just was not great, and they're having to do a lot of fast work right now to catch up during this fall camp. But definitely when you get dinged up or some guys are not fully healthy, it doesn't help you too much. But good to see that Jacob Rizzi is going to be probably a full go for you and be available. Let's go over and stay on the offensive side of the ball, and some more good news here. Landon Thomas, someone that got dinged up, and I believe some summer workouts. I believe that's what Norvell said. He returned to fall camp for the first time over the weekend. Former blue chip, top tier tight end from his recruiting class. He's back. Yeah. Also, too, Mike Norvell did say that he made a couple spectacular plays too, and the practice that he came back in. What are your thoughts on that one, D-Lou? Because I think all of us here, along with Austin, who's not with us this afternoon, but we've been very high on this tight end room, and we feel like this could be a group that could help out Thomas Castellanos going from week to week. But to get Thomas back, he's great with his hands. He can make plays for you, and he showed some signs to you last year that he can do that. But now matching that with a guy versatility of Randy Pittman makes it very exciting for this unit if Thomas is a full go.
It's huge. I mean, this tight end room, I think, has the potential to be one of the deepest in years at Florida State. And I mean, if the latest indications over at wide receiver are kind of telling of how this 2025 season is going to go, you're going to need that tight end room to step up for you in the passing game. And a guy like Landon Thomas is a true receiving threat. Same thing with Amari Williams and Randy Pittman. And, you look at Chase Lofton, a guy who can maybe a little bit small to be a traditional tight end immediately, but they'll have him out there in receiving downs and maybe get some work in the slot for him as well. And then obviously the experience that Marquise and Douglas brings, and the bigger body, a guy who can fill in as a blocker, but he can also catch some passes as well. And we've seen what he can do despite being more of a jumbo tight end. I mean, a guy that can still go out there and make some plays with his hands. So it's an extremely versatile group, and especially, with the way that Gus Malzahn not only has a tight end out there, but also that H-back position where you can kind of work Randy Pittman around, let him be a gadget type guy. I'm really excited about his capability. But Landon Thomas, getting him back is absolutely huge. I mean, potential to be a starter for Florida State, and especially with what we saw last year in year one, you're hoping that he can just continue to blossom now in 2025, especially alongside Amari Williams. I mean, both of those guys did some great work on their body during the offseason and have continued to mature their frames. And I think the biggest thing for both of them is just improving his blockers, because they're extremely athletic. They can go out there and, pluck the football out of the air, but to be able to rely on them consistently on every down, especially with the way that Malzahn wants to, really run the ball downhill, you're going to need them to block as well as go out there and catch.
Yep. Sticking with the offense as well, let's go over to Gavin Blackwell, which we mentioned a few times in here. Tim Harris Jr., Florida State's new wide receivers coach, said today you wouldn't have known that he missed some time. And this was on Saturday. So another player that seemed like he got in quickly and was able to find a groove, just like who we were talking about with Landon Thomas. And Florida State's wide receiver room, we touched on it quite a bit when talking about Squirrel White, but they need guys with some experience. Gavin Blackwell isn't going to be your ultimate game changer. And, he's not going to be at that caliber of a Deuce Robinson or a Squirrel White, but he brings experience. And that's something that this offense needs heavily going into this upcoming season. As it is thin, there's a lot of younger players. You got some younger guys dinged up, like we're talking about with Wayne McCoy. But to have Gavin Blackwell, the former UNC transfer wide receiver, getting going is, I think, a good sign there in the depth department for you.
Yeah, like you talked about. I mean, not someone that you're expecting to come in and just light it up, but a guy who's got plenty of experience at the college level, a veteran. I mean, has competed in the ACC for years, actually played against Florida State in the past. And I mean, he does bring plenty of speed to the table. And, obviously, I think the main concern is he just hasn't produced a ton during his college career. But considering, like you mentioned, the lack of experience in this Florida State wide receiver room, he's certainly going to have an opportunity to get on the field. Now, it does hurt that, he just arrived at Florida State this summer and missed a bunch of time already in the preseason, working his way back from an injury, and injuries have limited him throughout his college career. But, Florida State, they need the bodies in that wide receiver room right now. And Mike Norvell, Tim Harris Jr., they're looking for those guys to emerge over these next 11 days. And, we've heard some good things lately about Mekhi Danzy, and we've heard good things, especially early in the preseason, about Elijah Moore and the step that he was beginning to take going into year 2. So, I mean, we're just going to have to see. I feel like it's really an open-ended competition right now in that wide receiver room. I mean, obviously, if healthy, Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White are relatively locked into starting jobs. But outside of that, I think your other starting wide receiver role, jobs in the 2-deep, everything's up for grabs in Florida State. That competition, I mean, it's going to go probably all the way up to game day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's jump through these 3 here, and we can discuss them all together. There was an update on Caleb Lavale, someone who got injured very early since his arrival at Florida State. John Papuchis, who's now Florida State's linebackers coach, said, we get Caleb back at some point. That's going to even create more depth for us. He said that he's been pleased, too, with the work in the meeting room from that unit overall, but seems like Caleb Vale is getting closer and closer to getting back full 100%. Now, there's not a whole ton of crazy amount of film from him at UNC, not a whole ton of experience there at that level, but this staff was very high on him in his early recruitment at the high school level and tried to get him. He ended up going over to UNC and picking them in the Tar Heels, but they were able to grab him through the transfer portal, then got dinged up there and hurt his foot. And then also, too, Quindarius Jones was limited, but got some quality work in this last week. So it looks like he's going to be a full go. Hopefully, if things stay on the right strides, he's going to be a go for the Alabama game, which is another thing about that cornerback room, seeing who's going to step up there. And it's going to be very interesting, too, when that depth chart comes. We're going to be keeping a close eye at the cornerback position itself. And then, too, Daniel Lyons, someone that came into camp, was dealing with something. He's been limited, but now got some quality work in this last week and is getting back into game playing shape per Mike Norvell. So any big thoughts here on these guys, D-Lou, as we're getting so close, man. I think everybody can notice it, at least from us on here. We're like, can we just get to an actual football game? Because now
Please.
It's like we're near that end of fall camp practically. Florida State started today preparing for Alabama. So it's like, can we just get to some actual football games so we can see what the heck's going on?
Yeah, I mean, certainly some big updates, especially JP talking yesterday. He expects that linebacker room, like we have kind of thought, to go 6 deep. And, I would assume that includes the veterans in that room, Stephon Thompson, Omar Graham, Blake Nicholson, Justin Cryer, Elijah Herring, and then Caleb Lavale once he is able to return from his injury. But, I mean, as of that second scrimmage, he still hadn't been able to do much work during the preseason, and it's been unfortunate to see him suffer. I mean, such a long setback now dating back to spring practice. And like you said, Logan, I mean, a guy who really hadn't played a ton during his college career up to this point. I mean, started that bowl game for North Carolina last season, and I mean, showed some real promise there. But I think the big thing for him is, getting him on the field, getting those snaps. That's going to help him continue to develop. So we'll see once he is able to hit the field for the Seminoles. But I think the really important one here is Quindarius Jones, because like you mentioned, I mean, the battle at cornerback, Jeremiah Wilson's got one of those starting spots locked down. But outside of that, I mean, it's like a lot of other positions on the roster where everything is still really up for grabs. And a guy like Quindarius Jones going into year 3, Jabril Rawls as well. Those are really the two names that we're primarily hearing competing for that other starting job at cornerback. Now, Shamar Arnu, the true freshman, I mean, he's thrown his name into the mix recently, and Patrick Surtain had some really high praise for him last week, and said that the coaching staff is continuing to grow their trust in Arnu. And, he still makes some mistakes. He's a true freshman, but his consistency, his confidence have all continued to improve since he got to Florida State. But I mean, having a guy like Quindarius Jones who, going into year 3, and Jabril Rawls, Florida State's going to need those guys to step up. And they don't have a ton of experience. Rawls, a guy who got dinged up a little bit earlier in camp as well, believe that he's back out there. But I mean, it's a really big question mark. And then you've got guys like Charles Lester and Kai Bates. It's a room they're going to grow throughout the season. It's not going to surprise me if this cornerback room, with the lack of experience, struggles a little bit as this 2025 campaign unfolds. But as they gain more playing experience and, confidence in Tony White and the system, and actually being able to do it on game days instead of practices, I think it's a room that should get better as the season goes on.
You know what I love about Tony White is he's holding these guys accountable, no matter if you're younger, but has sent a message to some of those veteran guys. I think it's crucial for that because of last season, what he saw on film. And yes, they went 2-10. It's hard to really believe in yourself and go out there on Saturdays and such. But still, when there's times where you can make plays and you can stand up for yourself, or you could send a message to your own teammates and hold other guys accountable, that just wasn't the case on the defensive side of the ball. So, I mean, we've seen him do this. We've seen him send multiple messages. You've sent a very strong one after that second scrimmage. Didn't feel like the defensive play overall was there of the standard that he wants it to be at. But I think it's been because he's calling out guys that have been around the program for a good long while. I mean, we just saw, Conrad Hussey no longer be with the program, D-Lou. There was some concerns about about the way that he was going to buy into things. I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't think he fully bought into what Adam Fuller was doing. But at the same thing, though, and the same type of criteria, he wasn't going into Tony White's defense and feeling like he could go in and be useful. I don't know. I just felt like something was off there. Conrad Hussey, you had such high expectations, and then boom, something falls off there. And it's happened with 2 defensive coordinators. And yes, there's a reason why Florida State had to move on from him. There were some reports about some altercations there with a coaching staff member. But Tony White has laid down what it's supposed to be like in a Florida State defense, and we're seeing the full-on buy-in. We saw Earl Little Jr. He's a guy that represented Florida State up there at the ACC kickoff. It's just, where's Shaheem Brown? Where's Shaheem Brown at? And, where are some of those guys? And, I keep bringing up Darrell Jackson, but I'm just not hearing about Darrell Jackson. It's either we're not hearing about him because things aren't going so well there, or he is going to explode and we're going to see a Timmy Jernigan effect against Alabama, which I don't think that's going to be the case. But I do like the way that Tony White has been, since arrival, has been very transparent with his side of the ball.
They've got high expectations, and, they hold you to a very high standard. And if you're not meeting that standard, you're not going to play, and you might not even be on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's a question in here from Momo here on YouTube asking, any word on KJ Kirkland? I feel like we've been getting some buzz here in the last week or so on him. You're very high on him, D-Lou. And with the loss of Conrad Hussey here, it's allowed for him to get up and get some more burn as well in that secondary. What are your thoughts on KJ Kirkland? What maybe the season looks like for him this upcoming year?
It sounds like he's right there in the mix to be a starter for Florida State at one of those 3 safety spots going into opening day. Mike Norvell has talked highly of him this preseason. Tony White, I believe after the second scrimmage, mentioned KJ, and then Pat Surtain as well. So, I mean, they're pretty high on where he's continued to ascend going into now year 3 at Florida State, a redshirt sophomore. And obviously KJ, I mean, he's got that blend of the size, the length, the athleticism that Florida State is looking for. And then, I mean, he's also a physical downhill football player who isn't afraid to hit you. And that's obviously something that Tony White wants on this defense, a lot of physicality and guys that aren't going to be afraid to bring the wood. So I think KJ Kirkland, the work that he's put in, it sounds like he's been pretty consistent as far as guys in that safety room. It's not going to surprise me if he's one of those starters, right up there with Earl Little Jr. and Edwin Joseph. But again, I mean, there's still a job to finish here going up to August 30th. And we've heard some things from other guys in that room. Ashlyn Barker, someone who seems like he's taking some quality steps here these last couple of weeks for Florida State. And, you mentioned him, Logan, but Shaheem Brown, a veteran who obviously going into his final season at Florida State is hoping to earn a starting job in that room. So the competition, I mean, it continues on, but with where KJ's at, he's sitting in a good spot.
Yeah. Another person sitting in a good spot, and we'll finish it off here, is Ousmane Kromah. And we've been hearing excellent things about him. Now, it's hard now with us not being at the practices, and you get to see it firsthand and such. And now you go off of what you're hearing and sources and things like that. And mainly it's from people in the inside within the program. So they're going to give you a lot of positive things. They're not going to give you a whole ton of negative things. But this one right here, I don't think you even need sources or anything about it. I think you're just hearing what the staff is saying to you straight up, straightforward, and what you're seeing on video that the Florida State football program is putting out there. This guy has came in and has been ready to get after. And I thought his most recent interview said it straight up. He's ready to go against Alabama. He doesn't know what kind of burn he's going to get in that game. He's a true freshman. He doesn't know any of that, but he just knows that, hey, I'm going to be ready to go any way, shape, or form and what they put me at. I have a question for you, D-Lou. I think maybe all of us on here, including Austin, would expect for Roydell Williams to be, your starter to get that first carry in the game. But I think at some point, though, if things aren't clicking there, or they want to run 2 running backs or whatever it's going to look like with Gus Malzahn in this game, I think you're going to see a lot of Ousmane Kromah throughout just because of the physicality. Now, there might be some things that he's going to miss on, some assignments, some blocks here and there, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're going to get with a true freshman, definitely with the caliber of talent that Alabama is going to bring to you along with their coaching staff. But I think they've been super impressed by the way that he's came in and has gotten down some of that playbook, taken on some of those pass blocking duties as well. And you're going to see some burn out of number 32 out there. D-Lou, what are your thoughts on what this running back room will look like going into week 1 and the arrival of Ousmane?
Kromah has definitely surprised. I mean, he already had high expectations on his plate, and I mean, everyone knows that he's a very good football player. But when you miss spring practice, don't enroll until the summer, and you're entering a running back room that, I mean, at the top of it, there's a lot of experience there with what Roydell did at at Alabama, and what Gavin Sawchuk did at Oklahoma, and then Holmes obviously playing at Penn State, and Jalen Lucas at Indiana, Cam Davis and Samuel Singleton playing at Florida State last year. The youngest guy in that room with not as much practice time as anybody else in that room has already quickly risen up this depth chart. And like you said, I mean, when you're seeing Florida State posting these highlights of the running backs, it's always Kromah, the guy out there making plays, whether it's a run or a catch or a goal line drill where he runs over Blake Nicholson, who's going into his 3rd year at Florida State. It sounds like he's really opened up the coaching staff's eyes, especially lately. Same thing with other players on the team. And, I do think going into this game against Alabama, it's obviously such a big game against a premier team. I do think Florida State, they'll probably lean on their veterans a little bit early on, like Roydell and Sawchuk, I think, are going to get some early looks against the Crimson Tide, but they're certainly going to sprinkle in Kromah's opportunities. And if he does go out and produce in those opportunities and, maybe look a little bit better than Roydell or Sawchuk, he's going to get more of them. And like I said, I think by the end of the year, this guy, I mean, he's most likely going to be your starter at running back and a bell cow at Florida State for the years to come.
Yeah, well said. And I think, too, Mike Norvell gave us some hints after that second scrimmage in the red zone. Not only did he score once, but he scored multiple times there. And that just goes to show that dude's physicality. And I wouldn't be shocked if Florida State reaches that red zone a few times, hopefully a lot of times next Saturday. But when they reach that red zone, I'd keep an eye on number 32 and the sideline that they sub that young man in, because you need physicality for a game like this. And why not? I mean, why not? And, I would like to see, Roydell Williams take the next step, and this staff feels very highly on him, but this is kind of a different type of talent. And at some point, you just can't resist not putting a guy out there like that and go ahead and cut off the leash to him, let him go. But yeah, I think that's going to do it with this show. I know we were just talking about Roydell just then. I know Cam Davis was brought up here from Momo, but I think for Cam, for me, to more of film and understanding where he needs to be in assignment wise and vision wise, and utilizing that and having some patience as well. I think he likes to use his size and such. We saw that he trimmed down a little bit, but a lot of that we're not going to really figure out until we go into the season, to be honest with you. Because yes, we hear about Usman Kroma, but like that's what you're saying, that's mainly who we hear about, and you don't really get a whole ton of highlight clips from other guys in that running back room, except for what you have with this true freshman coming in. But I think that's going to do it there for us on Hear the Spear. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We'll see you later in the week as well, most likely on Thursday evening, as we will be giving our season record predictions. And man, oh man, It feels like here we go. I think they might be a little bit different than the ones that we had previously going into the 2024 season.
Just a tad.
But it should be pretty entertaining. So we'll see you guys on Thursday of this week at 7 p.m. If you're still here with us, smack that like button down below. If you're new here and interested in hitting that subscribe button, we would deeply appreciate it. Got tons of content always coming to you guys all throughout the week. We'll see you on